Hi and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Local Marketing. I'm your host, Christian Bannister, Head of Marketing at BrightLocal. On today's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Colin Nielsen, who's VP of Local Search at Sterling Sky. Colin has over 10 years experience in local search, working across a wide variety of different clients. And I wanted to tap into his expertise to discuss a topic I've been thinking about for a while now, and that's building a local SEO playbook. So what do we mean by a playbook? Well, Colin's going to go into much more detail about his perspective on what a playbook is and the role it needs to play as you go about doing local SEO. But think of the playbook as much more than your standard local SEO checklist. This goes much deeper. Yes, we'll be talking about the things you need to consider when you're going about local SEO, but we'll also be talking about how the playbook should inform how you work with clients and how you can continue to expand and sharpen your playbook by bringing in new ideas that you've been testing. So let's jump into my conversation with Colin. Hey Colin, how are you doing today?
I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. We had your colleague Carrie Hill on not too long ago, and so another Sterling Skyer. Do you say Sterling Skyers, or have you got a specific name?
Yeah, it's funny you ask. We definitely, we were incorporated as Sterling Sky Inc.
Yep.
But we have also kind of come to be known as the Sterling Sky Dream Team, which is something we've sort of started internally. I believe the name came externally. We may have trademarked that at some point.
Nice.
Perhaps. But yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Awesome. So the second of the Sterling Sky Dream Team to appear on the Adventures in Local Marketing. So why don't you tell me a bit about Sterling Sky? Obviously, if anyone's listened before, Carrie did give an explanation, but if anyone hasn't listened, it'd be great for you to talk about what you do at Sterling Sky, your role there, and maybe you can also add some unique perspective based on how you work with clients.
Yeah, so Sterling Sky was started in 2017. Joy Hawkins is the founder of the company. And, essentially Sterling Sky was born out of this desire that, Joy had, and certainly myself as well, that we wanted to start an agency that was, we were kind of getting success for our clients based on our own research and testing. So we wanted that freedom to kind of create like new strategies that were based on our own discoveries, as opposed to just kind of doing all the mainstream things that people think about when they think about local SEO. And this kind of came because Joy and I both worked for marketing agencies together, actually. Joy and I have worked together since 2010, which was the beginning of my local SEO career. She goes back to probably 2009. But we just had experiences working in other agencies where we just really wanted to change how they approached SEO, but it was always just a struggle. So Sterling Sky was the solution to that, basically.
Nice. And so the testing mentality, is that something that actually goes into your day-to-day? Is it stuff that you're always playing with? And is it stuff that then determines how you work with clients?
Yeah, and I think it'll probably come up a few times as we chat today, but testing is definitely a core component of what we do. We've got dedicated hours that are assigned to people on the team each month to be performing tests. And then we basically, on our team meetings, our SEO meetings, we present any tests that we've come to a conclusion on since the last meeting. And then any of those tests that actually are these wonderful sort of new discoveries that can add value for our clients basically make their way into kind of like our playbook and our checklist and that kind of thing.
Nice. So it's really ingrained into the culture, this testing mentality.
Yeah.
So when you go about it, is this clients that you're testing on, or is it kind of your own little setup that you're allowed to muck about with?
It's definitely a bit of both. So we've got, internally, some of the employees have their own personal websites, for instance, that we can use. We have some sort of, back in the day, as part of the top contributor program, Google was kind of okay with sort of creating some test listings and stuff like that to perform on, which we don't really do anymore, but there's some that are kind of left over. My brother has a listing. He was a paralegal for a while and he stopped doing that, but he still has his listing. So I've kind of turned my brother's listing into a sort of a test subject. So it's a combination. And we're definitely also testing on our clients. It's actually a really good conversation I've found to have with a client, where you kind of approach them on your monthly call or whatever it may be and say, look, we've got this really cool thing that we're pretty confident can add some value, but we need to test it through. And like, how do you feel if we kind of test this on your site or one of your profiles? And they're usually excited about it.
Nice. It's great that the clients have buy-in. Is that something that comes with your reputation, or is that something that you have to build up with a client over time?
A bit of both. We definitely have a good chunk of clients that come to us that are pretty familiar with us just through reading, our content, our blogs, webinars, stuff like that. That are just, they basically hand over the keys to the trust to us right off the bat. They're totally fine with that. And then there's other clients where, you definitely need to build that relationship over the first, 3-6 months, maybe a year. Before they're sort of fully comfortable with you testing on them.
Yeah, I can imagine, so I guess a lot of this can probably be touched on in the playbook that we're going to be talking about, how actually you build in trust along the way. So maybe that then allows you to maybe expand and try some more things. So how about we jump right into it? So we're going to be talking about, building the local SEO playbook. So I guess a good place to start is, what do we actually mean by the playbook?
Yeah, so for us, the way I like to think of a playbook is it's more of a compass versus like a map, right? So it's kind of pointing you in the right direction. It's giving you things to think about and things to do, but it leaves room for the creativity, the freestyle approach to some of this, which I think is really important, especially when you progress in your local SEO career. So it's definitely a compass. And for us, our playbook, if you guys remember, we used to have a live local SEO training guide that we would publish and keep updated every month.
Yeah.
We decided to kind of stop doing that. And we've basically pulled that internally. And now that's basically expanded to be our internal kind of playbook. So every test result, for instance, that becomes a new tactic that gets baked into the playbook. It provides a compass for how we approach, how we work on stuff.
And so this idea of a compass is really to, I guess, not tie you too much to a set of tactics. Is it the sense that it's not going to be the same for every client? They're not going to be working potentially in the same industries. They might be in different competitive markets. Is that really what it's there to do, to kind of stop you from having tunnel vision and thinking, well, this is definitely going to work?
The way I like to think about our internal guide, and certainly in the context of a playbook, is it's the place you can go to for any question, anything that comes up in the course of working on a client in any capacity, right? So if you're doing on-site optimization, or if you're doing Google My Business work, spam fighting, whatever it may be, and you get to a point in your day and you're doing some work on a client where you're stuck, or you have a question, or you need to refresh your brain about, does the redressal form still work for this particular case? Well, the playbook is the place to go. You go to the playbook, you do a search, you pull up the page that's all about that thing, and it sort of provides you with that extra little nudge, if you will, in the right direction. But it's also super detailed. So if a new employee starts at Sterling Sky, one of the things that we do with all our new employees is they're going to read the entire playbook over the course of, the first couple of months of being here. And they're going to get a lot of details out of it. But certainly as you progress in your career and you sort of get to that stage of like unconscious competence in how you're doing local SEO, then the playbook just serves as more of a reminder and like that compass sort of guidance.
Nice. So, what you're describing, I'd imagine that it doesn't actually sound all that similar to maybe how some people view a playbook, which is, I guess, just either kind of a longer checklist of things that you might need to do, or a longer set of things that you need to audit, or tactics that you need to employ, or whatever. It's kind of like, so it's not prescriptive in the sense of this is everything that you need to do, and if you do this, you'll unlikely have big success.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that. So we do also have a living, sort of breathing SEO checklist.
Okay.
That's also like a core component of like when we work on clients, and we keep that updated. And the checklist draws from the playbook, but the checklist is essentially extracting the important specific tactics from the playbook and highlighting them and saying, when we work on this new client, here's all the Google My Business things that you have to remember to do. And here's the priority and the impact of doing those things. So for instance, when we take on a new client, this checklist is basically added to that new client's project in our internal kind of tracker system. And like I was mentioning before, the only way that new tactics actually make it onto this checklist is if we've tested them internally. So like you'll find a lot of tactics that generate incredible results for our clients, but they're not the sort of generic mainstream tactics that you commonly see people talking about.
Okay, nice. And so you publish a lot of these tests. Are there some tests that you are keeping internally and aren't putting out there? Or are you quite happy to actually, share the knowledge of the stuff that you're finding?
Yeah, so I usually put the number up around 80, 90% of tests and things we discover. We share about 80 to 90%. Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair estimate, I think. And then, yes, there's certainly some things that we make a collective decision internally that there would be more benefit to keep it sort of, as a secret sauce type thing, or however you want to think about it. And there's different reasons. Sometimes we'll choose to keep something between us if it's just, we just think it's going to do our clients a disservice to kind of get it out there. Or if we think it's going to do the tactic or the industry as a whole a disservice. Just as an example, like a couple of years ago with Google My Business, they, the chat support keeps coming and going. And this isn't really a tactic per se, but at one point, once people were publicly talking about the chat feature, it got so overused and it basically became a really horrible thing when originally it was a wonderful feature to use. So if we decide that there's a tactic that we kind of say, look, if everybody knows about this and everybody's doing it, it's probably going to have an overall negative impact, then that's something we might keep between us.
Okay, nice. So there is some stuff that's hidden away in the vaults of the Sterling Sky playbook that might not see the light of day, but I'm sure that you're going to share loads of great actionable stuff as we go along. So I think the kind of benefits of having a playbook are pretty clear. So what are potentially some of the pitfalls, or if not pitfalls, what are some of the mistakes that someone might make when they're building out their playbook?
I think the biggest pitfall of having a playbook is becoming dependent on the playbook. So I think for someone new to local SEO, if we bring someone onto the team that is new to the industry, sure, yes, you'll need to stick very close to the playbook because you're learning and you're at that very sort of you're consciously incompetent at that point in terms of the 4 stages of competence. But as you sort of get into that realm of unconscious competence, where I sort of like to think that's where I am, sort of 11 years of doing this, you've kind of had so much practice that things become second nature, so that if you're still constantly always going by the checklist and sort of afraid to deviate, I think it can stifle creativity. And some of that, like I find some of the most value for clients sometimes is when you can just take your 10, 11, 15, 20 years of experience of just looking at things and take like a freestyle approach to looking over their website, looking over what the Google homepage looks like without following any checklist or playbook. And often that's like the most valuable thing. So yeah, I think biggest pitfall is just don't become dependent on a checklist or a playbook.
So I reckon we should probably start jumping into this playbook. And the way we're going to do this is, rather than describing everything that would be in a local SEO playbook, because there's obviously a huge amount of stuff that could go in there, we're going to do it chronologically. So we're going to give it the context of working with a new client. So from kind of like day one all the way through to the end of the first year, and breaking it down into the stages that make most sense, talking about how the playbook might be informing what you do. So I know everyone's probably really keen to hear like what this is, but I think before we jump into that, I'd like to talk about, what's happening before you start work with a client. So what are the conversations that you've needed to have to feel like you can have a really informed strategy and then start dipping into the playbook?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it all starts in the sales process. Having that initial conversation and feeling out whether or not there's a fit to work together. And I think a really big part of that, if you're doing things right, is basing part of that decision on like a personality fit. If you're at a point where you're able to sort of filter the businesses you work with by whether they're going to be a fit character-wise, core value wise, if those are aligned, that's all sort of like the really, really initial important stuff. Because if that stuff isn't aligned, there's no point in moving forward. There's no point in taking on a business that you don't feel aligned with. So, and then the other big thing is that once we kind of get past that phase and we determine that, yes, this is great, we're going to do some work together. The very first stop is always a local SEO focused audit. And so we do this for every single client that we take on as a new business that we work with. And so the local SEO audit, basically, it puts the strategy and the tactics together. So when we talk about that initial, checklist and that project for that client, that is coming directly from the initial audit that we do. It lays the groundwork. The other really cool thing I like about doing audits is that I find it really gives the client a window into how we think about and solve local problems. So usually when we deliver an audit, there's at least a bunch of aha moments where, they had some sort of problem and they just weren't thinking about fixing it in the way that we think about fixing it. And once we present that, it's very eye-opening. Like, oh, wow, okay, this is how these guys think about this. It's pretty cool. So then it really is serving as a relationship building tool, so that right off the bat, we have that strong relationship with the client. They have buy-in, they understand how we think about local SEO problems, and then we can kind of start putting our attention on like the first month of working together.
Okay, nice. So the audit that you do during the sales process, is that like all the bells and whistles, really detailed, really deep? Or do you use a lighter weight version as a kind of way of maybe not giving away everything that they could be doing?
We go deep right off the bat. Yeah. So kind of the flow of our audits, it usually starts off with going through everything to do with the Google My Business side of things, looking through the dashboard, looking how they're utilizing all the features. As we know, there's tons of features and there's constantly new features in there. So just making sure they're kind of using those, and if not, putting a strategy together for that. And then, from there, we're shifting our attention to the review ecosystem. We start looking through the website, both from a content perspective, a technical perspective, looking at title tags and meta descriptions and internal linking structure and all that kind of stuff. Then we get into competitor analysis. We look at the backlink profiles. We get into, some of the EAT elements and just kind of looking and seeing what their reputation is like across the web. And so basically then the end result of this audit is typically, 20, 30, 40 action items that we'll prioritize based on impact, right? So we'll have our high impact items, medium, low. And then if we then turn that into a full ongoing relationship where we're working together on a monthly basis, we now basically have our strategy for the first 12 months of working together.
It sounds like, you're really just laying it out there for the client and not worrying too much that they might just go, oh, this looks brilliant. Yeah, we'll get the intern to do it. So you actually feel like, there's no point just like holding stuff back. If they can see the value in what you're presenting, they know your reputation as an agency, then it's going to be a no-brainer for them to go, let's start working together.
Yes, exactly. And I have, yeah, zero concerns when it comes to providing an audit with just putting everything out there. And, if I had to guess, I would say maybe 5% or less of the audits that we deliver don't turn into an ongoing relationship. And in that 5% where they either have an internal team or they just want to handle it themselves, that's totally fine. I'm happy about those situations too, right? Because they now have a valuable resource. They can take it, they can do as they will. And then that 5%, usually half of those people, a few months later, will reach back out and just be like, hey, I'm too busy, I'm trying to run my business here. Can you guys help me with this? And of course, we will.
They'll always come crawling back then. Brilliant. So how about we go through and say, let's say the client's on board, contract's been signed, it's week one of working with a new client. I'm guessing you've got those action points that are going to inform what you're doing, but what's typically that first week look like, and how does the playbook come into it?
The way we kind of work is for every client we take on, we center the project around an account manager. So as part of my role here, I do account management. So meaning I have a set number of clients that I'm directly responsible for managing that relationship and sort of the strategy and the tactics. So in the initial internal kickoff meeting, what the account manager will do basically is assemble a team here at Sterling Sky with the people on the team who have the skills to accomplish the goals that the client is trying to accomplish and based on the audit. So if, we determine, for instance, that this client needs links badly right off the bat, then absolutely there's going to be one, maybe two people from our link building team, our earned media team, that are part of that initial kind of team for the client. So we're having that kickoff meeting, making sure everybody understands the client's goals, just understands the business really well in terms of what they're trying to do. If it's a dentist and they don't do any pediatric dentistry, well, that's very important to know. So we need to make sure that everybody on the team understands that deeply right off the bat. There's nothing worse than making a suggestion to a client about something that they don't do, for instance, like, why didn't you know that? So that's a really important part off the bat, is getting everybody on the same page. I would say by the end of the first month, certainly we want to make sure that conversion tracking is set up for our clients. So call tracking metrics or call rail, whichever we happen to be using, getting those set up on the website, the Google My Business profiles, making sure that Google Analytics is set up properly, that we're tracking goals properly, making sure that we have access to Google Search Console. And then I would say, getting all our sort of tools set up for the clients. So we use BrightLocal for every client that we set up, as well as a few other tools that are kind of similar, but have slightly different ways of interpreting the data. We really like to have that nice sort of that landscape horizontal kind of view across the board. So like BrightLocal provides this wonderful way of looking at things, but then there may be this other tool that also provides rank tracking, but it kind of gives you a slightly different perspective, right? Or there might be something else you can do with that tool. So we kind of set up all of that stuff. And that's usually kind of where we are by the end of month one. We've definitely started doing some actual work to drive the goals. But I would say the main goal in month one is getting all the tracking stuff set up so that moving forward, you've got your benchmarks and, you can actually communicate results.
Nice. And do clients kind of get that this isn't a case that you're going to be going there and, refreshing all of the website and doing loads of activities? This is pretty much about just making sure that you're set up to be able to track performance, kind of spot issues, and then ultimately, I guess, showcase success to the clients. Is that something that, you have to communicate to them?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, there's definitely a very small percentage of clients historically that we just weren't able to, I guess you could say, educate them on why they need to be doing call tracking and have goals set up in analytics and all that type of stuff. And every time that happens, that relationship usually ends at some point. I just, whatever the correlation is there, but so yeah, we just stress that, look, this is arguably the most important part of all of this, because we're going to be doing all these wonderful things for you. If we don't understand really specifically the results of what we're doing, then we're not going to be able to give you the value that you deserve and that like we expect us as a company to be able to give to you, kind of thing. So that's like the conversation. It's definitely an educational component for some clients. A lot of clients come to us though, they're already doing tracking, right? So it's just a matter of maybe tweaking it, making it better. You know, that maybe they've worked with 3 SEO companies in the past, so they've got some call tracking, but it's messy and unorganized. So often that's the case as well.
Okay, nice. So month 1, very much about kind of internal education, getting the right people on the same page, then kind of making sure everything's set up so you can effectively then push on with some of the work and maybe a little bit of work if it kind of jumps out. Is there anything that might determine when you're doing work in month 1? Is there stuff where it's just like, look, this is like a huge issue, or is it more just about having the capacity based on how much time is spent doing the other things?
Yeah, so if there's any super obvious low-hanging fruit, high-impact stuff that we discover in the audit, yeah, there's a very good chance that in month 1 we're gonna dedicate some time to that. A good example, like on the spam fighting side of things, is like if you discover that for some of their core keywords, they're in position 4 or 5 or 6, and 1 or maybe 2 competitors are pushing them out of the 3-pack, and they are keyword stuffing with a completely unreasonable amount of keywords in their business name, or they're set up at a UPS store or whatever it may be. Yeah, absolutely. In month 1, we're going to go after that stuff because it does not take a lot of time. And yeah, like at the beginning of month 2, when we send the report, that's wow, like that's pretty amazing, especially if you think of those like geo grid rank trackers that are color coded. You guys launched one recently, which is awesome. To be able to go like, look at this, you started with us, this was all yellow and red. We've been working together for 30 days and it's now all mostly green with some yellow. And we're going to work on that yellow over the next couple months. Which I do want to say that, you know, we tend to try to not focus on ranking as like the super end all be all metric. However, especially with these new style of reports, it's a really wonderful way of communicating performance increases that the client understands. So yeah, low hanging fruit, month 1, if we can go after it, we certainly will.
Okay, cool. So month 1's out of the way. Let's go through to month 2. Is it kind of complete change now? Because if everything's set up, now it's about kind of looking in more detail about those action points. I guess, yeah, what typically is happening in month 2?
Yeah, so in month 2, so the team that's been assembled to work on this client they'll all have their tasks, their priorities. So they're all hitting the ground running on the tasks that are kind of due for that particular month. You know, for instance, if link building is identified right off the bat as something they need, then we're already starting to establish connections with reporters and publishers that our client can contribute to. If they have NAP issues or NAP consistency issues or something like that, we're starting to clean that stuff up. So a lot of the, what we traditionally think of as the foundational local SEO stuff, we're kind of making sure that stuff is clean and kind of cleared up. And again, still starting to chip away at any of the initial low-hanging fruit that we maybe didn't get to in month 1. So I'd say month 2 is a little bit of a spillover, but it's also like the team is now like officially hitting the ground running as far as tactic execution.
Nice. And then I guess based on, an average of clients that you work with, what typically are the low hanging fruits? Are there any that just constantly come up? So it's almost like you're almost somewhat prepared that that's stuff you're going to be working on in the first 2 months.
Well, certainly having your homepage title tag say home.
Yeah.
That's always a big one and a very common one. But okay, so definitely, spam fighting is always a big one because it's super obvious and something that you can find. I would say the next one would be around the GMB profile itself. If you look at the things in Google My Business that actually influence ranking, it's not everything in there, right? So you've got your business name, you've got the website, GMB landing page that you use in there, your reviews, your categories, and your attributes. We've kind of discovered recently that attributes can actually influence ranking. So that stuff is going to be looked at, because that I would consider low-hanging fruit, because we know it directly impacts ranking. So if we discovered in the audit that they're not using the proper primary GMB category, or they're missing some secondary categories, that's something I would consider low-hanging fruit that you can kind of take advantage of right off the bat. I think another one would be if they're a law firm or a health practitioner, and they have a few different practitioners there. You can implement a really powerful practitioner kind of Google My Business listing strategy right off the bat and start seeing some results for that. So just to give you an example, we actually just published a case study on this dermatology practice. And one of the things we did with them was, because they have so many different things they do, they cover so many different Google My Business categories. So their main one would be dermatologist, but then they're also doing hair transplant work. They're also doing skincare specific stuff. They're doing hair loss. And there's all these categories for those. So if we can recognize, wow, you have a doctor there that only does hair loss treatment, well, we're going to go set up a GMB for that person right off the bat, because you're probably not going to be able to compete in hair loss if your category is dermatologist, because all the people competing for hair loss are using the hair loss category. So that's something I would consider some good low-hanging fruit that you can execute pretty quickly.
Nice. I like that, actually, because I guess, say a dental practice, I think there's maybe something like 8 or 9 possible categories that they could be targeting. And I'd imagine that, probably the vast majority of dentists they'll be going up again will just go, dentist, dental practice. It's kind of an obvious thing. But if you have the opportunity, if you're in, any kind of business where there's different practitioners, so pretty much having GMBs for each of those, rather than trying to make a compromise and, okay, well, we want to go with dentist because it's got the highest potential search volume, and then missing out on all of those offer opportunities.
Yeah, I think the dental categories are actually up around like 12 or 13.
Really? Wow.
There's a massive amount of categories. It's bonkers. That situation, we experienced exactly that, actually, when one of our first clients at Sterling Sky is a dental practice, and we still work with them. And when they came to us, their branding, their focus is cosmetic dentistry, and there's a cosmetic dentist category, which they had as their primary category. And like logically, you would think that would be the best category to use, but kind of through like our experience and our testing is we kind of suspected that if we switched that to the dentist category and moved the cosmetic category to the secondary sort of categories, that it would actually benefit the practice as a whole in a much greater way, because there's sometimes much more search volume for people searching for a dentist versus people searching for a cosmetic dentist. And they also offered all these other wonderful services. So by making that one change, the rankings for dentist near me, dentist plus city immediately improved, right? And they didn't experience sort of a counter decline in rankings for the cosmetic stuff. So it was a wonderful sort of trade-off.
Nice. Yeah, I guess like people won't necessarily always be searching specifically for the procedure they need. They sometimes will just kind of go with the generic dentist near me and then maybe look for whether they do that. So yeah, it's a really good insight. Nice. Okay, so month 2 is kind of up and we're into month 3. Is it a continuation of what might have happened in month 2, or is there anything else that starts to open up?
Yeah, so there's definitely a continuation component to it. And, one of the things that by month 3, and this goes back to month 1, but by month 3, we really want to have established the habit of sharing progress with the client. Or both, I should say, progress and performance. And I kind of look at those two things as two separate buckets, right? There's like performance, which is here's the data. Here's, we set up all this wonderful tracking at the beginning, and now here's the numbers. Here's how many phone calls you got. Here's where they came from, and here's how they've improved. Okay, wonderful. It's performance. But then the progress side of thing is equally important, especially for certain clients and certain mindsets and personality types where they just want to see that you're doing stuff, right? So that's the progress component. That's saying, look, here's what I said I'm going to do and what we're going to do for you. And here's how far along we are with actually accomplishing the things we said we're going to do. Personally, what I like to do is every single time I do some work on a client, I send them some form of update, whether it's performance related, progress related, or even just a check-in to say like, hey, this Google just changed this thing with Google My Business, and it's probably going to impact your business. So I think you should know about it, right? And so there's like an educational updating component to it. So that's a big thing as we get to month 3 is have we established that really, really solid communication as far as progress and performance. And that's on top of the monthly reports that we provide our clients every single month.
Nice. And I guess with an average client, after 3 months, is there going to be a material improvement to performance? Because I guess we all know that, some of SEO can take time. Obviously, there will always be potential quick wins, but is it likely that after 3 months, you're able to go to the client and look and basically say, you were here and now you're here? Or is it the case that sometimes, these initiatives will take more time and there needs to be that education that, it's not a magic switch and, this is kind of a longer process?
Yeah, I definitely feel that in most cases, we're definitely moving the needle, certainly by month 3, right? It very much happens in month 1 when you think about things like moving from position 4 into the 3-pack, which as far as, movement is not a far movement, but in terms of impact it's massive. So by month 3, typically we've always presented some sort of really nice performance increases on top of any like progress with the tasks and stuff like that. If you've got everything set up properly and you're focused on the right things, I think it's typically fairly easy to demonstrate success, especially when you look at them in terms of those 2 buckets, right? Progress and performance. So yeah, by month 3, I definitely don't, I think I used to sort of agree with the old adage that, SEO takes a super long time. And I do think in certain cases it does, like maybe if we're talking about, e-commerce SEO or big, huge, massive national projects for national companies, and they're super highly technical and there's lots of stuff going on there that can take a long time. But I think when, as far as we're concerned with the types of businesses that we work with, which are your SMBs, your service area businesses, your brick and mortars, your law firms, your plumbers, those types of businesses, I truly believe there's no reason why you can't get really good results within the first couple months, if not the very first month of doing work.
And so by the end of month 3, what would typically have been done or be in place beyond, say, the reporting that's all set up? What are the most common things that would definitely have been tackled in those first 3 months?
Yep. So certainly one of the big things we like to look at right off the bat is just like the structure of the website itself and the content. So we're big proponents of fixing or making existing content better versus just creating new content or publishing 4 blogs per month for the sake of posting 4 blogs per month kind of thing. So by that time, we've definitely sort of put a site plan together where we've identified, all the pages on the site, identified any pages that are kind of similar or related to each other that probably have an opportunity to be combined into sort of one strong page instead of having this sort of mess of, 5 different pages kind of on the same topic. So that would be a big thing for sure that we've kind of established and started really, really making progress on by then. And then, I think, going back to the earned media side of things, we've definitely secured some pretty cool opportunities for our clients, typically by month 3, in terms of getting them some publicity or, just featured on some really cool local industry specific sites or specific to their locality. That stuff's going to be happening for sure. And then, we've going back to our checklist and sort of our testing that fuels this checklist. We've probably checked off a bunch of really cool things off of that list by that point. We've got some things that we like to do with the main website menu. in terms of optimizing that. There's some very specific things we've discovered that you can do with the menu that are very sort of high impact. So really going through those like cool items on the checklist that sort of either support the other things we're doing, or even if they sort of exist independently of those things, we're starting to really check those things off the list as well.
Nice. Are you able to reveal what that cool thing is you do with the menu?
So there's a few things. So one thing, and I think this is probably more of an obvious thing, but when it comes to the menu, I guess what I'll say is it's really important to pay attention to what is in the menu. Sometimes a client will come to us, and I'm sure you see this all the time, where you'll kind of click on a menu item and you'll open the drop-down menu, and it's like this astronomically long, ugly looking menu. What I will say is that by kind of focusing on that and fixing that type of stuff up, it can have an impact. And I think it just goes back to the fact that when somebody lands on your homepage and they're looking through your menu, I almost think of it like a restaurant menu, right? Mm-hmm. It's whatever's on the menu, those things are going to get like attention. They're going to get activity. And you know those times when you go to a restaurant and the menu is like 10 pages long, well, you kind of just get into this sort of state of, decision paralysis, I think it's called, or something like that. So I think the same thing applies in a lot of ways to a website menu. So thinking about the website in those terms can be really beneficial.
First 3 months are over. What's a good timeline from now to talk about? Is it the next 3 months, or is it worth continuing, through to month 4?
Yeah, I mean, I think the next, 4 to 6 months, even 4 to 12 months, because usually, the initial plan that we put together for a client, it's typically a plan that can sort of last for at least a year, right? So we're kind of continually executing that plan. But then obviously as new things come up, right? Google launches a new feature. We discover something else impacts ranking. All those things kind of get baked in along the way. But certainly by, month 4 to 6, I know I keep saying this, but it's just such an important part of what we do is we're ramping up relationships for our clients and earned media opportunities and performing more outreach to try and get pieces of content in front of people who would be interested in sharing it or find it useful for their audience and that type of stuff. Yeah, I think it's really just a continuation as we kind of go through month 4 to 6 for sure. And definitely by this time, if we're looking at month 4 to 6, by this time, I would say it is very, very rare that some sort of results haven't kind of been yielded for the client by this point, for sure.
Nice. And so what are the typical results you're reporting to clients? Are they, very much focused on kind of conversions, whatever that is for them, if it's, calls or form inquiries? Is that generally how you're building out your reporting?
Yeah. So when we send our monthly reports, it's basically broken down into 5 main components. So the first component, which I think of as like the CEO slide, if the CEO is reading this and it's the only thing he has time to read, then he's going to read this, and it's the ROI slide. So this is how many phone calls you got, form submissions, and where specifically did they come from, right? Localized organic results, Google My Business, from the ads we're running. From there, in terms of highlighting sort of performance and progress, we like to get very visual. So before and after screenshots are a huge part of communicating performance results in our reports, and also just in those kind of like ad hoc email updates that we send to clients throughout the month. And actually one of my favorite tools to use for this is BrightLocal's and the rank tracker. And we've had access to this for quite some time. I think it's part of your standard tool set. I could be wrong, but it's an amazing feature where you can basically run a ranking report and pull a screenshot of the search result for that day for that keyword, and then you can go and set the date for another date. So maybe a month earlier before you started or when you first started working at the client. And so think of something like maybe we secured or acquired like a new one box or something like that. Well, BrightLocal is a wonderful way where you can just quickly go and grab those screenshots. And then having that visual of what the search results look like when there was a 3-pack or when you didn't have a featured snippet or something like that. And then right beside that shows what it looks like now that you have the one box or the featured snippet or whatever it may be. That's the kind of stuff that we really like to focus on, because you can get so lost in data and like, we drove this much traffic and this and all this kind of stuff, which is really important. But at the end of the day, for like busy business owners, when you can give them that visual thing, it's like they don't even have to think about it. They look at it and they go, okay, this is good. It looked this way before, and now it looks this way, and I love this. And then with our reports as well, we're super transparent with our clients. So we actually will give them a line by line item of everything we did that month. So we have an internal work log where, as we're doing work on our clients, we record everything, and we basically copy and paste that into their report, removing any sort of internal fun that we might be having.
Yeah.
And just kind of cleaning it up a little bit for the client. But we give them that, and some of our clients absolutely love it, and I know they actually will read it on weekends, and they consider it very high value to have that. There's other clients that are a little bit indifferent, and they just don't have the time, and they just trust us, and they just like, I don't need to see everything you're doing, and that's fine too. And then the last part of our reports, whenever we provide them for a client, is we like to highlight, say we're sending a report for the month of April. Here's the top things in April that Google changed or did or launched or whatever it may be that may have an impact on your business, right? So, and then that gives a talking point for the next time you get on the phone with the client. You can say, look, you remember that thing I sent you? Well, here's what I'm seeing now. And, I think it's going to impact your business. Here's what we should do. Or, what, don't worry about it. It's not going to have any impact on you guys. It's only applicable to this industry or something like that.
Wow. That's the first time I've heard of any agency actually sharing kind of what's happening around the industry or what Google is specifically up to. Does that kind of help you kind of really give context to the things that you might then be doing? Or is it just a kind of transparency thing of like, this is kind of what's happening, these are the things you need to be aware of?
Yeah, at its core, it's a transparency thing, but it's also just, certainly one of our core values at Sterling Sky is just that we want to share as much as possible. So it plays into that. And yeah, it also creates it's a conversation piece. It's a trust builder. It's a lot of our clients are just so appreciative of the fact that we want to keep them informed. Like, we understand that, the dermatologist that we work with is super busy and he doesn't have time to do local SEO, but he does value being informed. He does like to understand, at least at a very high level, what's happening in the world of Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever it is, right? So that's the big part. And some clients, again, they probably are a bit indifferent to it, but I would say the majority really appreciate it.
So you said that generally, within the first 6 months, you've been able to deliver some sort of success. There's definitely been progress. I guess, are there any instances where maybe that wasn't the case, where after 6 months, there was, for whatever reason, I guess, like you just didn't make the kind of dent or move the needle in the way that you needed to? And I guess if it was an instance, kind of like, how did you go about then resolving that going forward?
Yeah, I would say that usually when that happens, it's probably mostly a case where we start working with a business who everything is going very well. So, they're if you look at one of those GeoGrid ranking reports, all their core keywords are basically green, right? They're in the 3-pack. They're crushing it from a reviews perspective. Their website is pretty technically sound, and the content is good, and the internal linking structure is really good, and all that kind of stuff. And there isn't a ton of spam to kind of clean up. So, they're coming to us basically saying, hey, Sterling Sky, things are going pretty good, but I need to make sure that it stays this way. So that would probably be the most common scenario where you're not seeing, certainly not as dramatic of sort of performance results by month 6 or even month 12. In those cases, though, what I find, like the most important thing, and one of the value that I think we bring to the clients, is not just the levers that we're pulling per se, and like the work we're doing, but sort of the knowledge that we're here to support them and keep them pointed in the right direction, and we're staying on top of all the algorithm updates that happen and making sure we understand what a particular algorithm update implies for them specifically, and sort of staying on top of that kind of stuff. So in that case, it's really just about sort of shifting and just making sure that the client understands the value of the consulting component of the relationship, in addition to the pulling the levers component. And then there's also definitely been clients over the years that have parted ways with us after a year, maybe 6 months. It has happened before, and usually when that happens, it's I take the responsibility in all cases, regardless. But it's usually a matter of us not effectively being able to educate the clients away from preconceived notions that they may have had in their head about what success looks like. So maybe it's being super laser focused on like a particular keyword, and all these other wonderful things are going on around it, but there's tunnel vision around this one thing that the client wants for their business. So again, that falls back on us, and sort of the learnings we've had from those types of experiences goes back to that initial client kickoff meeting, and just really understanding that you understand the client intimately, and also making sure that you are only bringing clients in to work with that have all those qualitative fits as well, right? Like there's a character match, there's a core value match, there's a personality match that we can work with, and then there's also a match in terms of like understanding what the goals are going to be. So I think the times where we've missed the mark is where we didn't properly establish the relationship and the right goals right off the bat.
Yeah, it's obviously, seems to be a big part of what can breed success, right? Just like from the offset, shared values and kind of a real understanding of how you're going to work together. And then, does that generally become quite obvious after about 6 months if there's just been a misalignment then?
I don't think any clients have kind of made their way in the door, period, to begin with, if we haven't sort of checked off some of those boxes. So we catch them pretty quickly. So it's been a while since we've experienced something like that, and we've gotten better at that initial process. But certainly by month 6, yes, it'll be very obvious if there isn't a fit, and then you kind of just deal with it on a case by case basis. Sometimes you got to end the relationship, and that's that's all it is. Sometimes sometimes you might just have the wrong account manager leading the charge, where there's a personality mismatch between the account manager and the client, and sometimes just fixing that fixes the whole problem.
Nice. Okay, so we were going to take it up to 12 months. So how about we kind of look at the, say, 6 month to 12 month period? How would you kind of describe what's happening here? Is there stuff that was still in the audit that's kind of being worked through, or are new opportunities opening up in those 6 months?
Most of the things on the audit would probably be have executed by then. And this is really where, when we go back to that checklist, that living, breathing checklist that we're constantly adding new things to based on our test results, that's where that really starts to come into play. Because now we're actually adding new things to do for the clients based on tests that we've recently done. And kind of the flow that we have here is we have our testing hours that are going on every single month. Joy does a lot of testing. I do a lot of testing, and there's a few other people on the team that do some testing. And then if we have a successful test that turns into a tactic, we talk about it on our team meeting. And then that literally gets pulled into our playbook. And then from there, we'll sort of add it as a to-do item in the checklist. And then the checklist will link to the playbook where it describes the tactic and how to execute it and all that kind of stuff. So So yeah, by month 12, we're starting to really pepper in the checklist items that maybe weren't part of the initial audit, but we know is going to add extra value for the client moving forward.
Okay, nice. And so you spoke about maybe it's about the kind of 1 to 3 month period that you generally go about improving existing content to begin with. Is there a shift at some point where actually you kind of either the data's telling you that, this content, actually isn't working and potentially needs to be completely restructured, or there's pages that are completely missing based on keywords that we could be targeting? Is there a kind of path that basically leads into new content creation at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on how big the website is, I find that refreshing kind of older content, especially if the client has a blog that historically has been successful, that's going to be an ongoing thing. So I see clients that we've been working with for many years. Some of our original clients, like, we're still updating certain pieces of content. And also, if we started working with them 4 years ago and 4 years later, some of that content that we updated in year one, we're kind of going back and revisiting now 3 years later. But then, yes, as far as creating new content, that is something that we look at as well. And we definitely sort of focus it on a couple things, but typically around like doing a competitor kind of content gap analysis would be like the driving kind of force around new content. So it's like, what are your top competitors doing currently? Do they have any interesting pieces of content that are driving a significant chunk of their traffic that's about something that we're not talking about on our client's website? So that might inform some new content ideas that we're doing for our clients. Yeah. So, and then as far as blogging, it's always worth just quickly touching on, because it's a big part of the content process. Our approach is, don't blog for the sake of blogging. But if you start working with a client who historically has a ton of blogs, and we'll very often see a situation where if a business like blogs every month or multiple times per month, in some cases those blogs, if you look in analytics, is driving a huge chunk of the traffic, but they're not driving conversions in a lot of the cases. So usually there's a strategy you can kind of develop within that realm where it's like, how can I make this blog more of a business goal driving piece of content versus something that is just kind of out there driving traffic to the website, but then that traffic isn't doing the things that we want it to do when it gets to the website.
And so let's say we've got to the end of the first year. We're not going to dive into the second year because obviously I don't want to keep you too long. But I guess what are the main things that you're thinking about as that first year ends? And then how is that informing how you're going to carry on working with that client?
Yeah, so once we've completed a full year working with a client, what we really start to think about is those like year over year analysis and year over year comparisons. So what we do is at the end of each year, so certainly at the end of the first year, but we actually do this at the end of every year working with the client, we compile what we call an all-time report, fueled using Data Studio. So we'll make sure that Data Studio is connected to all the different properties that we're tracking, conversions and performance and all that kind of stuff, pull it all into Data Studio and really start to understand like what's been going on over the last year and how that compares to the year before. What are the winners? What are the losers? What's driving the majority of conversions? And how do we take advantage of that and all that kind of stuff? And then we're actually in the process, pretty excited about Noah Lerner has these incredible, he did a presentation about it at Local U. He's got these super intensive like Data Studio on steroid, amazing reports. Probably, I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but I'm super excited for those. So soon we're going to start using those as well. And that's going to be baked into our sort of like ongoing, certainly our yearly analysis process, where we just want to have as much data as possible and be able to look at that year over year to like truly understand how things are progressing and performing, and who the winners and losers are.
Nice. So I can imagine if you've got your initial audit, there's obviously loads of action points that come out of it, which from the sounds of it can be delivered usually within the first 6 months. I guess, does the client expectation then kind of change based on potentially there being a kind of a looser set of deliverables? Because if you've not got the action points, I guess how you kind of showing progress beyond actually performance improving over, say, the first 12 months, then into the next year?
Yes. So certainly this is where we really want to stay focused on the business goals. So the phone calls, the form submissions, the new patients, the new clients. So just being able to continually communicate that, hopefully, right, the goal is that is going up, and not flat or going down. So as long as we can do that on a continual basis, in some sense, everything else is kind of, secondary to that, right? Yeah. Because if the goal is to get, 10 new patients per month or something like that, and they're hitting that goal or improve or succeeding over that goal, then everything else, there's no questions asked, right? Like, yeah. As far as the client is concerned, when you're in a situation with a client where things might be a little bit flat or declining for some reason or another, that's when you really need to, I think that's where communication just comes in as such an important part of the relationship, where you say, look, and transparency and honesty, where you say, look, like, here's what's going on. Things aren't moving as quickly or in the direction that we want them to, but here's what we're doing about it. And here's the plan moving forward. And you make that completely transparent, and it usually goes a long way. But usually, and again, and this is why I would tell any agency who does work for clients to always be testing, because that is where you're going to get your sort of like, it's like the golden goose that keeps laying the golden eggs, right? If you're the one that's coming up with new things to do, and they work because you've tested them, that there's nothing better than that, right? If you're only sort of looking to, not to say anything bad about Moz, I love Moz, but if you're only looking at, say, Moz's, SEO guide, or looking at like really popular industry publications, then you're missing out, right? Because all those things you're probably already thinking about anyways. You're probably already doing them. So internally at your agency, you absolutely need to have a process where you're figuring out things on your own. And I think in the long run, that's one of the most important things to maintaining that relationship and always having new stuff to do.
Sounds great. Yeah. So like the testing kind of feeds what you can then go on to deliver for your clients. And in the absence of that, if you're not testing, if you're not experimenting, I guess you'll get to the end of the Moz checklist and then you'll be like, oh, okay, what next? So definitely sounds like it's something that just really needs to be baked into how you're thinking about how your agency works.
Yes. Yeah.
One more question about the playbook. I guess we've spoke about, how Sterling Sky uses its playbook, but I can imagine a lot of agencies probably don't have something in place. So what would be your recommendation to anyone listening about how they should go about building their own playbook, even if it's just making those first few steps?
I think it's important to have somebody that owns the playbook. Someone on the team that's responsible for keeping it organized and updated, and just having a good process for getting things vetted and into the playbook. If you don't have somebody that owns that process, it's going to be very disorganized. So I mean, that's the most important thing. And then, and again, just to sound like a broken record, test, because the way you're going to build an incredible playbook is by figuring things out, right? And discovering new things, because then your playbook is like an actual unique, valuable playbook, as opposed to the same playbook that everybody else has, right? So have somebody to own the playbook, and make your playbook unique, but effective as well.
So before you go, we ask our guests just a couple of questions to finish things off. So the first one is, what's the one skill that you think a local SEO should really look to develop over the next 1 to 2 years, let's say, to help them further their career?
So there's a few. So I was thinking about this, and the one that I boiled it down to, which I think is the most important is curiosity. And I was kind of looking up some definitions of curiosity, because I mean, we all understand what curiosity is, and it's, you almost either have it or you don't when it comes to things. So, if you don't find yourself being super like curious about local SEO, like it's not exciting and you're not curious about it, it may not be the path to go down. But if you find yourself being genuinely curious about it, fan those flames of curiosity. And really, like, curiosity just means the ability and the habit, right, to apply like a sense of wonder, a desire to learn more. Curious people are trying new things. They're asking questions. They're searching for answers, making new connections, like within the industry. So I think curiosity is like a foundation, fuels everything else that somebody is going to accomplish in certainly with like a career in local SEO.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. Okay. And then the final one is, if you could go back, so you said you started in 2010, right?
Yes.
If you could go back to then, what advice would you give yourself?
I recently read a pretty famous book for the first time recently called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he talks about persistence in the book. And I think the first one or kind of the main thing I would tell myself is, look, just be persistent. And there's a quote in there that goes, riches don't respond to wishes. They respond only to definite plans backed by definite desires through constant persistence. So I think figuring out something within local SEO that you want to go deep on and be insanely persistent with that one thing. So some people, Jason Brown, for instance, he's the man when it comes to reviews. He understands reviews better than anybody else. So I think if you can do that with like a burning desire to be the most knowledgeable person on the planet, like literally adopt that mindset for that one thing.
Yeah.
But then also like know enough about everything else to be dangerous. I think that's the key. That's what I would tell myself. I think you said one thing, but I had two other quick ones in mind. So the second one would be like develop a mastermind group. And I think these are pretty popular today. There's tons of Facebook groups and local search forum and different types of forums and stuff like that. But if you're starting out and you can kind of create your own little mastermind group of, who knows, maybe 3 people, 5 people you meet once a week to talk about local SEO, that's something I would have told myself to do when I first started out. And then last thing, one other quote by Napoleon Hill, just because he's all over my brain because I just finished his book, is he says, every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent success. And I think in the SEO space, there is so much opportunity for failure in SEO, like just getting things wrong or whatever it may be. But on the flip side, it presents a massive amount of opportunity. And as long as you can look at all those failures, you did something that broke a website or it caused it to tank in rankings, or you screwed up a domain migration or whatever it may be. There is so much learnings. And if you can have that mindset of like, what can I learn from this so that, hopefully I never do this again, but also like, I'm just a more well-rounded, knowledgeable person. I think that just creates a lot of opportunity.
Brilliant. Fantastic advice across the board. Yeah. So the book, could you just give us a shout out for what it's called again? And I'll drop a link in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out.
Yeah, it's called Think and Grow Rich. The author is Napoleon Hill. I believe it was written actually in the 1930s.
Oh, wow. Cool. So this is like some, old age wisdom that kind of still rings true today.
Yes, for sure. In the concept of the book, he sort of followed around and sort of interviewed and understood some of the successful people of his time, like think Henry Ford, something like that. And sort of then he put together these 13 steps, as he sort of refers to them, to success based on all those experience. And there's definitely some stuff in there you want to take with a grain of salt, and keep in mind that it was written in 1930, in the 1930s.
I can imagine,
but there's a lot of stuff in there that you can definitely pull out and sort of apply to your personal life, but also your career in SEO for sure.
Brilliant. Well, Colin, it's been a real pleasure to kind of diving into this topic of a playbook. So I really appreciate you taking us through that, your transparency along the way, and all the advice you've been able to give me and the listeners.
Thank you so much. I had a pleasure. This was really fun.
A big thanks to Colin for joining me today. I hope you've been inspired by what you've heard. Perhaps you've got a playbook already in place and you've got some new ideas about how you can go and refine that and take it forward. Or maybe you haven't got a playbook at all and this is giving you the motivation to go away and start building that. Whatever the case, good luck and I'll catch you again very soon.